This is a special session because we're very honored and happy to have Rudina here with us and Rachel Weiss here with us. Rachel's up from New York, where she heads digital for L'Oreal, and Rudina is a partner at Fairhaven Capital here in Boston, which is a VC firm that invests in early stage startups. She's an expert in digital media startups, and our friend here, Rachel, is an expert in digital. And we are very excited that they were here to have a conversation. It's really meant to be a very informal opportunity for you to hear sort of both sides of the spectrum on how innovation happens, marketing innovation happens at global brands like L'Oreal, and how they think about working with startups, how they think about the changing media and marketing landscape, and some of the new things that they are doing there to really reinvent the way that they connect with their customers in really interesting, fun, exciting ways. So you'll hear a lot of that. And then you'll also hear Rudina's perspective on the new landscape of young companies that are changing the face of marketing today. So it's kind of this neat back and forth between the two of them. And I hope you enjoy it, and they'll also take questions at the end. So if you have them or you think of them along the way, hold on to them, and they'll take some questions at the end. Okay? So enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie. So I'm actually going to try to maximize the time that Rachel speaks, because we in venture capital talk a lot, but we do less. We just manage the money, and it's the companies who get it done. So I'm going to do my best to give most of the airtime to Rachel. So why don't we start a little bit by doing some level setting. I hope a lot of the women in the audience know of L'Oreal, but for the broader and diverse demographic, why don't you give us a very short snippet on L'Oreal and what it stands for as a brand?
Well, L'Oreal is the #1 beauty company in the world. And we have 23 US brands, and some people are not aware that L'Oreal Paris, of course, is our flagship brand, but we own brands across the entire beauty spectrum. So Kiehl's is a L'Oreal brand, Lancôme is a L'Oreal brand, professional product brands like Kerastase, does anyone use that brand? Redken, those are L'Oreal-owned brands. And then we also have an active cosmetic division with brands like SkinCeuticals, La Roche-Posay, Vichy. So you can see that our business completely touches beauty across any way that a man or woman would use a beauty product.
And by the way, I should have said Rachel is running a high fever, so she's normally very high energy. We're going to try to keep her going, so if you can't hear her, just come closer. But so on that note, I go to a lot of retail conferences, and I have direct-to-consumer commerce placed in my portfolio companies, and one of the driving themes or investment themes for me is this notion that retail as we know it is dead. Meaning that existing brands, whether they are brands with flagship stores, physical or online, or CPGs, like in your instance for the beauty category, need to do something different and fundamentally respond to what's going on with the consumer trends. What's your view around the future of retail and how that impacts L'Oreal?
Well, I do not believe the future of retail is dead, Rudina.
As we know it.
As we know it. However, I do think the consumer decision journey has evolved and is continuing to evolve. And that means many things for a company like L'Oreal and how we touch consumers across different channels.
For example?
So, for example, I'll give an example of our beauty advisors. So, traditionally when you shop in a department store with a, lady behind the Lancôme counter where you went to make to get your makeover and to decide what products you were going to buy has rapidly changed. We're looking at retail environments like a Sephora where it's touch and feel and there's more of a showroom environment. We're looking at e-commerce. We're looking at m-commerce. We're looking at the opportunities among social channels where we know that advocacy is a definite opportunity for us in the beauty retail game.
And so when you see these changes, two things. One, how are you taking advantage of the changes in behavior of the consumer? And secondly, how are you leveraging social and digital media? I mean, you are the head of digital strategy, so what is your thinking around it all?
It's changing so rapidly, and my thinking is that over the last 5 years since I started at L'Oreal, social has always been something that we've advocated as a specific channel. Where we're moving now is social should be integrated in the upfront of any marketing campaign and should be not in the hands of a social community manager, but in charge of marketers who are setting product strategy up front. So for a social strategy perspective, you have to find the right channel to solve the right problem or reach the right audience per your marketing program and per your objectives from the get-go and not as an add-on.
And so let's talk a little bit about what constitutes a successful program on social or any of the other channels. Is it simply the like? Is it the share? Are we at the point where you guys have enough data and input to measure an ROI? How are you thinking about that?
Well, we're still, social is still an infant channel at L'Oreal. And the way that we're thinking about it today is that, first of all, how do we listen? How do we see what our customers want? I'll give an example. So, we saw on YouTube, and there are so much consumption of how-to beauty videos online. And that raised a question for us. We know the appetite is there for our customers. How do we engage that audience with who are consuming those videos? How do we insert ourselves in that conversation? Where do we insert ourselves in the conversation? How do we engage those who are already having that conversation? And that is across social, that's across our own media, that's across our paid media. I mean, the opportunity is so broad, Rudina, that listening first and just using technology to get a handle of what's even happening out there has been an obsession and a focus for us in the social space.
So let me pick up on a cue there, the word technology. How does technology fit within the marketing world at L'Oreal today? Because I think of L'Oreal, and when I think of products, I really don't think of the cutting-edge digital strategy or digital adopter. How's that? Am I wrong?
L'Oreal is a 100-year-old company, and innovation for us in our DNA has always been about product innovation. And now we're in a place where we're really talking about what media innovation looks like. Traditionally, we've been about TV and print the last, uncountable years. And digital has really only become a big part of our corporate conversations, I'd say, in the last 4 to 5 years.
And so within the CMO's office, where does technology and innovation fit in the context that you are discussing?
Well, L'Oreal just hired our first chief marketing officer a little over 2 years ago. And that is the first CMO, period, in a 100-year-old company. And the US was the first country to actually have a CMO. So that was really about having 23 brands acting as independent entities, knowing that now we need to have a little bit of a consolidation and governance and leadership and thought leadership about what technology innovation looks like. So our CMO is the different breed of CMO who's really focused on innovation, but first and foremost technology innovation and digital and communication innovation.
So we are in the startup track, and I do invest in startups, so I wouldn't be a good venture capitalist if there wasn't anything that's self-serving. So let's talk about startups breaking into L'Oreal, and for the purposes of this discussion, let's assume that you are fairly representative of the CPGs. I have a startup that wants to sell, whether it is a loyalty platform or some sort of engagement, a SaaS play, you name it. How exactly do they break in, and what's the best path? Do they come in with one of the 23 brands? Do they find a hook through me to you at corporate? Talk a little bit about that dynamic.
Well, it was really interesting, and the fact that I'm sitting here with Rudina, and I'll be upfront. I know Rudina because it's fascinating too. When I started my job at L'Oreal 5 years ago, that I'm now spending a lot of time on the phone with venture capitalists to understand what's happening new in market. Companies like L'Oreal traditionally relied on our agencies and our big media agencies to bring those opportunities to us. What we see is that speed is very different of what we're seeing in market, what I hear from someone like Rudina, versus sometimes what I hear from my agency. So I'm spending a lot of time asking our VCs and our investors, who are friends, to bring me ideas. So as a startup, leverage your investor, because that is a definite way in the door to a company like L'Oreal.
But let's see, let's say that the investors, before we even put money in this company, want to see a little bit of traction, maybe for the seed, maybe for the Series A, but we would like to see a little bit of traction, maybe one customer or two, maybe a big name. So if this is a scrappy founder CEO that has really groundbreaking for the purposes of this discussion platform or technology that they have come up with. How do they navigate the politics and the bureaucracy?
Well, that is the biggest challenge, Radina, because it's really, then you have to find someone who is your champion within the company who fully understands what you do. You have to be fully able to explain what you do to a variety of different stakeholders. And you have to it becomes a partnership. I mean, one of the challenges of my job is I'll find a startup that I truly believe could disrupt our business and be scalable. But they don't have another brand that they've worked with. They don't have a case study. It's really difficult. So then at that point, I look to them to talk about, well, so-and-so is going to invest in them, and this is where they are in terms of the investment track, just to add some credibility. But it becomes a credibility game, and it becomes a joint sales, it becomes a partnership between you and your advocate within the company.
So let me push you a little bit more. What if I wanted you to get really tactical on what are the 3, 4, 5, you can make whatever bullets that you'd like this CEO to do or to keep in mind, he or she. What kind of advice would you give them about the budget cycles or who they're speaking to? I mean, get very prescriptive, if you will, for my sake.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important, I think, if you're a startup, to really ask a lot of questions of the brand or the company that you're talking to and find out what their pain points are, find out what innovation is defined by them, where they're focusing their money, what their budget cycles are, where the money comes from, how often it's released. I mean, at L'Oreal, we have something called the Next Fund, which is an innovation fund which is corporately owned to actually foster innovation among our brands. There are cycles of that. We have innovation speed datings. I mean, most companies are adopting those kinds of models. I would ask a lot of questions.
And what about the sales cycle to L'Oreal? Is it an enterprise cycle, like 12 months, 6 to 12 months? Is it a shorter cycle? And again, a bit it depends on the company that's pitching you, but how should people think about the sales cycle to you?
Well, it moves in 2 different speeds. I mean, we start planning for 2013 plans last May. So that was always our traditional cycle of planning and budgeting. We are now very conscious that speed doesn't match with what's happening in innovation. So we're always evolving our own internal structures to be more aligned with what's happening within your market, Radina. So that's where we have things like innovation speed dating, we have different funds, we have brands submitting ideas for things that have never been tried before. That happens on an ongoing basis.
So when I torture Rachel on our many conversations ongoing, and I say, why is this deal not moving fast enough or whatnot, one of the words that you use nonstop is patience. When should a company differentiate, or how does one differentiate between being patient, because people are still excited, there's just this cycle that you need this buy-in, etc., versus is just a hopeful, optimistic CEO, but there's nothing that's going to happen there, or if it happens, it's really a little test, and the dollars are not there to support that platform. Any clues, any hints there?
Well, I mean, at L'Oreal, we believe in really deep partnerships, and what people like me and my job are being tasked with is coming up with scalable opportunities. That takes time in a big company like L'Oreal. So, if you're in the door and we're already having initial conversations, there are so many pitches that we get a day, like you do in your business, Radina, that we really have to place bets and bring people in the door that we believe in. So you've already reached that hurdle if you're seeing yourself having a few meetings.
So let me shift gears a little bit and talk about part of the title of this panel or this fireside chat, the lipstick piece. A bit unusual for a woman to be in a senior position at L'Oreal. For those of you who don't know, it markets to women for the most part, but it's a very male-dominated and run company with many changes for the better occurring in the recent years. And then I come from venture, need I not say more. So with that, I'm curious as to what drove you to come up with the Women in L'Oreal, Women in Digital idea, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, and I will disclose that I serve on its advisory board.
So, L'Oreal has always been about supporting women. We actually have a more mature arm of the company, which is called L'Oreal Women in Science, which promotes women in their postgraduate careers in science. What we've seen from the digital space as we talk about innovation and what Radina and I have been talking about is that there's so much opportunity for women-led companies to really address our core female customers. And as we start to expand innovation budgets, we don't see a lot of women walking through the door for meetings. However, talking with people like Rudina, we are seeing such an influx of women-operated companies that are so meaningful to the beauty business that we really want to advocate to talk to L'Oreal and to help mentor them. This year we had we crowdsourced a contest for the Next Generation Awards, and we asked for who are the game changers of women in the startup space, and we had over 2,500 women nominated, and we chose 5 of them. So women is becoming a pipeline for us for innovation, because we know that narrative for our business to reach our female customers should be created by women for women.
And by the way, on that, 2 winners out of the 5 were from Boston, so shout out to Boston on that.
Yeah, we had Bettina Hein from Pixability, so that's a great example of a startup that's addressing a need in our business, which is how do we distribute how-to video content. And we had Sarah McElroy from Fashion Plates, who for us really represents the future of e-commerce.
Lovely. So with that, I'd like to actually open it up to the audience for any questions on any of these topics or others, for primarily Rachel, but I'm happy to address them as well.
Well, Rudina, can I ask you a question first?
Okay. Turning the table.
So, I mean, you know, we're talking about women in our business. What are you seeing on your side of the table from the VC world of women coming through your doors?
Women CEOs?
Yes, women CEOs.
So it's interesting. So I lead the consumer practice within Fairhaven, which is really either direct B2C or B2B for C, and so enabling platforms. And in this day and age, they very much span consumer internet, digital media, or enabling technologies for offline, because we're seeing a lot of technologies driving offline spending. And I think digital has opened a new window for women. I see probably, if in traditional hardcore enterprise or security plays, you see one woman every so many meetings, I would say it's almost 50-50. Not quite, but almost 50-50. My portfolio, direct investments, is actually balanced. It's exactly 50-50, not by design. I also will flip it on its head and say, just because you're a woman and just because I happen to be a woman investor doesn't mean that you're going to get my money. I want to be successful in my career measured across, you know, all genders and all demographics. So from that perspective, the fact that you're a woman doesn't help simply by gender. Where it helps with digital, and especially around retail, is around the notion that women in the households control 80% of spending. So if you have that background, and technology has gotten to the point, especially e-commerce platforms, that you don't need to be a techie, you don't need to be a computer scientist by background to be able to build a business. Those two aspects have really, I think, opened up the doors for women who are either re-entering the workforce or are frustrated with the way things are done and are starting up actually fundable companies. So it's quite a good change. But I'd like to turn it to the audience for any questions.
How important is technology that connects an online display ad or impression to an in-store purchase?
It's important. I mean, it's definitely where we're really focusing on for what digital innovation looks like for L'Oreal is how do we use that second screen to influence the consideration phase, which is either before someone goes into a store, while they're in a store. You know, our hunch is most of that's going to happen through mobile devices. But yeah, it's important. It's an area that we're really focusing on. How do we connect those dots? We are seeing innovation in that space, and next year, you know, when we announce our Women in Digital program and we talk about what our grants are going for our innovation funds, it will be how do we connect those dots within retail and within technology, advertising.
Go ahead.
Just curious, how do you work with, like, if it's a new startup and they just are looking for that brand to kind of just test the product? You know, how would someone go about doing that?
Well, it's interesting. We're starting to do a lot of that now. It's a big part of my job. I mean, it's to Rudina's point, it becomes a game of patience, because we have to sell. Part of my job is working in a corporate function and selling into brands. So, you know, I have to go into the brands and say, what are your pain points? What are your needs? Then I go back into market and look for companies that might help us to solve that. You know, it's ongoing dialogue. It's ongoing conversations. As your companies evolve, you know, always keep us in touch. And, you know, we'll be very upfront if we don't think it's going to work at the beginning.
But if I may follow up, you were saying something, Rachel and I were having dinner last night, and you were saying something about everyone wants to win the business of L'Oreal Paris or the Lux products, but then you have these smaller brands, and how there have been some corporate deployments coming from the smaller brands. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, some of the great success I've seen, and even companies that were really small at the time, like Buddy Media, have placed bets on working with some of our smaller brands. Even agencies have done this as well. I mean, we have smaller brands who aren't Maybelline, who aren't Garnier, who are hungry, don't have those big budgets, don't have a big RGA agency helping them out, and become their own internal agencies. So startups can really, it can be a win-win for both if you're flexible on pricing, because it helps them, you know, everyone's very competitive at L'Oreal, and everyone likes to be first. If you find a champion in a small brand, it could be a win for both.
Just a follow-up on that. So if I came in and said, look, I just want you to try my product, I don't want to charge you for this initial round, is that appealing?
It is appealing, and it happens. But of course it has to be meaningful, because the bandwidth of what we get pitched from different companies is a lot. So it has to be meaningful with whatever those brands' issues are. Can you solve that? And then the other thing is, can you deliver what you promised? Because part of it is the technology and part of it is your company, but a big part of it is the relationship too. And when you have to like us and we have to like you, especially as you're going to scale such a complex company.
Go first.
Hi.
I don't know how much you know about the Hispanic market, the U.S. Hispanic market, but the numbers show that Hispanic, especially women, are huge users of digital media. They consume digital media far more than the general market. What are the L'Oreal brands doing to attract this audience?
We do have brands doing different kinds of programs. I mean, Hispanic marketing has been a focus for us. You know, it's interesting. We actually have people within our organization who that's their full-time job focusing on that. I can get back to you with programs that are happening today. I don't have that off the top of my head. Things are happening.
You go ahead.
Curious to know your thoughts on value exchange advertising. Is that something that L'Oreal currently does, or something that you might be planning on doing?
It's something that happens within different pockets of our brands. I mean, again, we're 23 brands. Each brand has different media strategies, different budgets, but it's something that happens within different levels of our brands.
Go ahead, sir.
You ever participated in a startup's advisory board or anything like that? Those relationships up front?
Well, I'm a mentor on, you know, yes, I'm a mentor for Springboard, which is a women accelerator. Their pitch day is tomorrow, so yes, we're starting to do that. I'm starting to do that, so we can learn from exactly what happens on the startup end as well.
Because she does it so much informally, she might as well get paid. Go ahead, Adam.
As you look at large brands, multi-brand businesses that are led by both the desire for innovation as well as procurement functions, how do you make sure that procurement doesn't get in the way of driving innovation in an organization that needs to be more flexible?
We spend a lot of time with procurement. I mean, you know, educating our procurement partners is also now part of our job. I mean, I think that when you also speak to people in different brands, you have to understand our job is not just about yes, no, it's dealing with procurement. Legal is becoming, you know, a big part of my job now, because as we talk about social innovation, you know, that's not always so comfortable for our partners in legal. I spend a lot of time trying to, you know, navigate that area as well. So procurement and legal is, you know, you don't think about that being part of someone like mine's job, but it is.
But can they break deals, or can they simply delay deals?
Well, that's where the patience comes in, because sometimes you might not have to be patient because we don't love your idea and we don't want to move forward with it. I might be having to spend time with our legal partners to help educate them and help, you know, mitigate and assess risk of what that program could be, and that takes some time.
But it's a question of time, not them killing deals.
It's not them killing deals, no.
Okay.
It's an interesting function. I've worked with a lot of procurement groups. I think procurement tends to fall further behind the tech curve than the rest of digital marketers who are out there in front of it. So Diageo, I've worked with for many years, have just a very old system of procurement and assessments.
You know, I mean, for me, my job as someone who loves innovation and wants to do things very quickly, you know, having procurement now as part of the cycle is new for me as a marketer. But it's something that, you know, if you have someone who's passionate and your partner, we're going to, of course, not have procurement kill deals that we believe are strongly going to impact our business. But we still have to work with them, and we have to educate them, and they have to educate us too. We have to have a conversation.
What about the dynamic between the CIO in this context, you know, the technology guy versus Mark versus the CMO?
Well, you know, a company like L'Oreal, that whole function is evolving too. Our CIO reports into our CEO. We have someone who's in charge of IT marketing services who reports into our CMO and our CIO. I mean, the CIO is becoming a much more powerful figure, I think, in not just in L'Oreal, but in many corporations.
And is there any tension emerging between the CMO's office? Because you earlier said that the CMO is very much becoming this technologist marketer, if you will, versus the CIO who has always said the technology piece under his domain or her domain. How does that play out?
Well, it's really about efficiency now. I mean, if you think about a company like L'Oreal, we're at 23 brands, all focusing on innovation and e-commerce independently. I mean, the CIO and IT marketing function is really looking at enterprise solutions that make sense for us as a company, and that's where procurement comes in as well.
I think you had a question behind. Yes. So let me repeat the question. So what if you're a startup that is not aspiring to have venture money or anything of that nature, but it's still possibly interesting from their point of view to a brand like L'Oreal? How do you treat them? How do you deal with them? They don't have the VC lead in.
I mean, we still have people come through our doors who not always are VC backed. I mean, it's pretty much the same process. And, you know, you have to have something that's going to solve one of our problems and our brand problems. I mean, it's easier sometimes for me to sell in something that's unproven if there's investment there, because it shows, you know, our job as marketers, we don't do due diligence like Rudina is able to do. So, you know, knowing that someone's back, that always is helpful, but it's not always has to work that way.
Do you lose your job for not hiring IBM? Do you?
Excuse me?
Do you lose your job if you don't hire IBM, if you deal with a startup that is not venture backed?
No.
Okay.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, how does the brand feel about being known for out-of-the-box executions?
I mean, I think that there are ideas that we know have never been done before in out-of-the-box executions. It's, you know, listening to what those are. We have a pretty good idea of what those are going to be, and then we look for a market for it to help us solve it. Whether they're venture, if you have something that can help us solve a problem, and it's something, you know, for example, I'll give an example. Like, we're obsessed now with looking at diagnostic tools, and not tools that, when I mean diagnostic tools, like tools to help you assess what, you know, skincare is really complicated for people and really complicated for women. How do you know what your skin type is? What kind of devices can we use to help you diagnose your own skin type or be with a beauty advisor to help you be able to do that? We haven't seen a lot of great things in market yet to be able to do that. If you have that, whether you're venture-backed or a startup, you can bet we're going to look at it. And our own R&D is also looking at that as well.
So what are some of the must-haves that you're looking for in the market right now, and versus some other ones that may be very nice to haves from I'd love to see a solution in X? What would those areas
I mean,
be?
definitely diagnostic tools. That could be, you know, both online and things that we can use across our content channels. How do you determine what is the right makeup color for you? How do you determine what your skin care type is?
So what else?
How do we you know, educate you within, you know, how do we distribute content across a mobile device when you're in a retail environment with how-to information to convert purchase decision? Our bets are that, and then CRM is the big question of CRM, and what does that mean for a company like L'Oreal? How do we start to use data to find where our customers are, where they're spending time, where they're making purchase decisions, so we can spend our dollars more wisely? I mean, those are really obsession points for us, and how do we reach out to people across those different channels? We're sitting on a lot of data, and we are only touching the very tip of how we're going to be able to use that in a meaningful way over the next couple of years.
You're good? Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
With that, I think this will be a wrap. Hopefully, if you haven't eaten, you'll be able to get some lunch, and thank you very much.
Thank you.